All right, this is James the Giant Economy. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about something that is hitting the internet kind of by storm in certain places, I would say, and that is the end of the petrodollar, right? So we're going to jump into, we're going to talk about what is the petrodollar, when was it formed, what does it mean for us? We're just going to jump in, and what does it mean for oil too? Is it going to affect oil? What's going to happen, right? So this picture is great because Saudi ended the petrodollar with America, right? But they're talking about doing it with China. And we're going to go a little bit into that, right? But let's just read and go from here with these articles, and we'll talk about it. All right, June 2024, Saudi Arabia is expected to announce that it will cease all oil sales in U.S. dollars, making the end of the 50-year petrodollar pact signed on June 6th, 1974, which expires on June 9th, 2024. So yesterday, right? It's the 10th. This decision not to renew the pact stems from Saudi Arabia's recent invitation to BRICS and its move towards de-dollarization. Now, you might ask, like, what is de-dollarization? Why? What is that? Is right now, like 90% of the contracts in the world are in dollars. In other words, if say you're Apple and you are manufacturing things in China, right, or India or something like that, Apple's not going to say, hey, we're going to pay you in Chinese yuan or Indian rupees. We're going to say, hey, we're going to pay you this much in dollars. Take it or leave it, right? And of course, they, hey, we'll take it. Um, the other fact is true, right? As in, if uh, China says, hey, we need to get some money so that we can buy, the Chinese company says we need to get some money so we can buy parts to put together and then sell to Apple, right? Well, we need a loan. Well, what's that loan going to be in? Well, eventually it's going to be backed by dollars because the U.S. has now become the financial world. We're no longer great in manufacturing, which can be an issue, right? So the issue comes up, as we've seen with inflation, and when the values of currency change, right? So if the yuan, the Chinese yuan, goes down in value, but the dollar stays where it's at or goes up, or just doesn't go down as much, right? What happens is that $100,000 that you borrowed 2 years ago, that you were paying, 5 Chinese yuan for per $1. So in other words, you had a $100,000 denomination note or a $500,000 Chinese yuan denomination note. Now all of a sudden, if the yuan goes down, let's say gets cut in half, you still owe that $100,000, but now it costs you 1 million Chinese yuan, right? So this is where the tension happens in some spots, right? Um, and the U.S. has made the dollar is very stable and a great currency right now, as far as trading other currencies, because there's so much of it out there and so used widely, right? When you want a backed currency, you want to have stability. Okay, you don't want it to be like Bitcoin. It's worth X today. It cuts in half tomorrow. Next week it's up 125% from the original price that we talked about. You don't want that with people trying to buy bread and go to the market every day. It would just cause tons of chaos. Okay, so the petrodollar, what that was all about, it was, so let's go by de-dollarization. So as you've heard, things are starting to move towards, other countries are starting to move towards de-dollarization. Part of it was I talked about, part of it was the governments are using it as a weapon, and other countries like, hey, we don't want our belongings to be used against us, right? And so this current administration has kind of broken the trust of the people when they stole Russia's assets to protest the war. Which, again, not for war with Ukraine, but there are better ways to do it than going through and stealing things, right? Much better ways to put pressure on Russia. Um, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has informed the Saudi government that the country no longer accepts U.S. dollars for oil transactions. Shift includes now. I think he's off a little bit there. I think they're still going to accept U.S. dollars, but not just U.S. dollars. This shift includes consideration to accept other currencies such as Chinese yuan for oil sales reported in the Wall Street Journal March. Blah blah blah. Okay, so let's talk about what was the original pact. It was a pact signed in June 6th of 1974 with Nixon, if I remember correctly. What it was is the U.S. Excuse me, I need more coffee. The U.S. had used to have a dollar, used to have a gold-backed currency, right? In other words, if it could only produce it backed its currency by gold, it could only produce another dollar, it could only print another dollar if it bought that much more in gold to even out, right? So if we had like $1 million per every, Troy bar of gold or Troy ton of gold, then if they want to print $1 million, they have to buy another bar of gold, right? So it kept the government accountable because they said, hey, you can print, but you have to back it by this certain thing, which basically you're printing to buy it, and then move it from there. You were held accountable. You couldn't just print money and flood the market like we've seen in our generation. Hey, like we've seen in our generation. Um, so in 1974, Nixon took us off the gold standard and he put us on the petrodollar. Right? What is the petrodollar? It was based in an agreement between Saudi Arabia, which at the time was the oil producer. Right? I mean, there were some other minor ones, but Saudi was the biggest. They were the adult at the playground of oil producers, if that makes sense. Things have changed some since then, but they're still actually the one that really kind of controls the market the most, right? They're the instead of the adult of the playground now, they're probably like the preteen and the rest of us are in third grade type thing, give or take. At least that's how it feels. But Saudi still has a lot of pull in the oil and gas markets. The U.S. because of the shale revolution and West Texas has caught up, and Russia's always been a good player with, especially with the technology from the U.S. Um, but Nixon said, "Hey, the deal is this: you will only accept dollar. We'll agree to two things, roughly, is that the U.S., will protect the House of Saud, right? Because the Middle East is very under a lot of turmoil. We will." We will send our warships. We will protect you, the House of Saud or Saudi Arabia, right? The crown princes and their family, and you will only transact your oil in dollars. Okay, what that'll do for us, it'll give us a good stable currency. It'll give us lots of demand for our dollars. That means the value will not plummet. It will stay stable or actually could go up, etc. So in other words, the it kept the dollar stable. So a when you bought a Coke at the store, it only cost 25 cents still, right? If the value of the dollar goes down, that Coke goes up to $1. The same Coke, but it just costs four times as more, right? So that was the original agreement. That has just ended, right? As we see with all the news articles and everything like that. A lot of people are worried about it, but let's ask this: um, what the original agreement helped keep stability to the dollar, right? And at that time, it was based on the largest oil producer. There are more oil producers, right? And again, the Middle East, they're gonna accept dollars. They're just not going. They're just going to not just accept dollars. So they accept Russian rubles, Chinese yuan, Indian rupees, all that stuff. Um, and there's going to be a BRICS currency that's coming out. I think it's going to be backed by gold. That's why all the BRICS countries are buying a ton of gold. So we'll see what happens. But this caused a lot of stability for the dollar. So the real question is, what does this mean for two things? What does it mean for oil? What does it mean for the dollar? Right? Um, when you talk about oil, right? I don't think it's really going to affect oil that much. Okay, what do you mean by that, James? Well, oil is a commodity. It has value, right? And once it's burnt up, it's one of those. It's not coming back. We got to get more of it out of the ground, right? We can't just smelt it down like gold or silver or something else. We've got to get produce more of it. So I don't think oil itself, the purchase price, the purchasing power of oil is going to go down, right? I don't think it's going to affect oil at all because oil's still going to be transacted, still going to be needs. It's not going to affect the supply and demand of oil, right? But what will it affect? It's going to affect the dollar, right? So what it could do, this could actually, there's a possibility, again, nobody knows the roadmap to the future and a lot can happen, okay? But this could actually make oil cost more in dollars. What do you mean, James? As in, if oil was priced at $100 a barrel, we'll just use that for easy numbers, before this happened, and we fast forward 2 years and things have really come unwound, right? Well, the value of a barrel of oil is still going to be $100, or it's still going to be what it is, right? So if it's $100, if it's $100 US, let's say it's 1,000 Chinese yuan. Let's say it's 2,000 Indian rupees. Okay, that barrel of oil will still probably cost maybe 2,000 Indian rupees plus or minus a little bit, 1,000 Chinese yuan plus or minus a little bit. It may now cost 1,200 US dollars. Makes sense? In other words, the value of oil is not going to change. I think the value of the dollar against oil will change. So, what this means is if you are in an oil producing, if you have oil producing assets like I do and a lot of partners do, this has a possibility, again, we don't know the future, to be really good for us if it makes the dollar against a barrel of oil price go up. Now, it could just make the value of the dollar go down in general, which would make not just oil but everything go up in dollars, right? Because it's not, because the value of the dollar is not worthless; it's worth less, right? It's is worth not is worth comma less. So I think that's what we can take from it. In reality, there's the de-dollarization. They've been actually working on this for 20 years, right? It's just been getting a lot of steam since the pandemic for two reasons: because the U.S. printed a ton of money, and then two, because of sanctions against Russia and other things that the U.S. actually stole from other countries with the current administration to try and protest them and try to push the arm behind their back, right? Other countries saw this and said, we don't want that to happen to us, so we're gonna take our money away from the dollar. Um, but I don't think it's gonna de-dollarization around the world. Everyone that I've talked to says, "Hey, yeah, it could happen. We're not gonna be naive, but at the same time, it's not gonna be overnight. Like it's gonna take like 10, maybe 20 years or so, give or take. Maybe if we really fast forward 6 or 7 or 5 or something like that. But it's gonna take a bit of time. Okay." I don't know, maybe by 2030 with the whole World Economic Forum thing will be out. Who knows? But it's going to take some time because there's a lot of contracts around the world that aren't going to be broken that are all in US dollars, and it's going to take time for the new contracts to come up, those to expire, to renew, etc. Right? The dollar is still going to be a player, just like the pound, sterling, and everybody else. But it's just there's going to be some changes coming forward, and I don't know the extent of that. No one does. But as far as it talks about with oil, I don't think oil is going to have a problem. In fact, oil could benefit from this in the future. I don't see this a barrel of oil in my previous example going down to like $80 because the dollar's quote unquote worth less, right? Or the dollar to a barrel of oil is worth less. I only see it going up. So if you're in oil-based assets and you're making money off energy, off oil, off natural gas, this is going to be really good for you. Well, off oil, natural gas has always been this constant, but it's going to be really good for you. There's a potential it could be good for you, but I wouldn't worry about it if that makes sense. So that just took place. Again, we will see the differences in the future. Post your comments. I want to hear what you guys think. Again, I'm just looking with my knowledge and my experience. I'm just looking at what it could do in the future type thing. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I want your comments. Again, this is Jamie's Giant Economy. We're all in this together. If you want to learn more about what I do, you got my link. So go ahead and send me a message and we can chat and we will go from there. Hope you guys have a great day.